Okay, here we go. We're going live.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. I am Michelle Malkin. You have joined the second in our series this week of hashtag Malkin Live. And I told you that we were going to be dedicating every single day to driving home the message of hashtag expand the ban. The heat is on, the pressure is on, and we need to keep up the momentum. It is really difficult to break into the mainstream media on this. We definitely have our supporters out there and folks who are on the America First side on these issues, but there are so many distractions. I've got two incredible moms from American Workers Coalition with me, and we're going to be going over some of the important details of the programs that are undermining American workers, American students, Americans, particularly who work in STEM. But I wanted to get to just a couple of the big things that are absorbing all of the oxygen and why I think people on both sides of the aisle are wasting a lot of time. So many of you saw yesterday that at the press briefing, there was a grievance mongering journalist who has appeared at these press briefings before, a Chinese American journalist, Wei Jiang, I think her name is, who was whining because President Trump had a rejoinder to her that pestery questions that she was asking about COVID 19 should be asked of China. Ask China. And all of a sudden, it's the latest big racial outrage du jour. And the usual suspects on both sides are spending an inordinate amount of time on this. And, I had I think, a unique take on it because, sure, it would be easy to hijack the entire news cycle to talk about this, but really, who's to blame? If you give an ethnic identity politics grievance mongerer masquerading as a journalist media credentials to take over your press briefing, what do you think the results are going to be? That's all I have to say about that. We have far more important existential issues that face us. And this immigration moratorium, the deadline that is going to come up in less than a couple of weeks now for the president to hear from his various cabinet secretaries on whether he should extend and expand it, is coming due. There's been a little bit of progress. We've talked about it in the last weeks, and both American Workers Coalition and I and many others have been talking about several congressmen in the House, as well as a small contingent of Republican senators who have publicly called on President Trump to do the right thing and make this ban meaningful. And so I want to bring in Marie Larson and Hilarie Gamm. Let's see if I can bring them up here. Now, they will both be speaking to us. You won't be able to see their faces. And, like a lot of folks that are out there that work in this movement, you've got to maintain some sense of privacy. You put yourself at risk when you go out there and advocate for these things because they're going up against very, very powerful corporate interests, financial interests. So, hello, Marie.
Hello, Michelle.
And hi, Hillary.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having us.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for everything that you do. Of course, I urge everyone who's watching this stream right now and everyone who's out there online who still has, a voice and platform to follow American Workers Coalition. And correct me if I get this wrong, but it is at AMWORKCO, right, ladies?
Yes.
Okay, I want to start with Hillary. I want to go to you first because I want to get a little bit of background and history on how American Workers Coalition came about.
Oh, you have to go to Marie for that.
Okay, gotcha.
It's Marie. Go to Marie for that.
Oh, I mean, it's all of us. We sort of met up on Twitter, and a lot of us were making calls with Protect U.S. Workers, and Barbara and I met Hillary, and when Sarah Blackwell decided she wanted to run for Congress, we decided, she wanted to sort of do that, and so we wanted to keep making our congressional calls. So Hillary, has written the wonderful book Billions Lost: The American Tech Crisis and the Roadmap to Change. and we had connected and were working together. And, we all decided, hey, this is really important. We need to do this. So we got together and formed this group and plowed forward.
Well, I think it's remarkable. And as you know, ladies, I've covered these issues, I've reported on them, I've pounded on them for many, many years now. And the phenomenon that you have led of a truly grassroots movement, and I have to add a mom-led movement. Sarah Blackwell, of course, a mutual friend of all of ours and a real true heroine and leader in raising awareness about the dire consequences of so many of these foreign worker programs that are undermining American workers. She is a mom as well and a lawyer. And I had met her a couple of years ago, right around the time that Sold Out came out. And there have been a lot of old line beltway groups out there, and they've done a lot of great work and continue to do so. But what makes your movement I think really special is that you have moved the needle, you've moved the ball, and a lot of that has to do with congressional outreach. Hillary, can you talk more about that?
Yeah, of course. So, as everyone listening knows, this is our country. We're all American citizens. And if we don't voice what's best for American citizens now, our country will no longer be what it is today. And we've already lost a lot of ground, and we see a lot of partisanship, and also a lot of foreign interest and special interest that don't necessarily put American citizens first and our children, our future first. And so, as American moms, we felt that it was very important to rally other American citizens and then, in a very formal process, go and speak both in person and also on the phone to our congressional representatives and not give them, hearsay or feelings, but present them with facts. So for every one of the representatives and the legislative directors and the aides that we spoke to, we provided concrete facts about their states, about their counties, of the numbers of jobs that were lost from American citizens who had been displaced and replaced by foreigners, both because the jobs were outsourced to a foreign country or because their jobs were taken by an H-1B, an L-1, an H-4ED, or an OPT. So we provided facts, fact-based discussions to a variety of these various different congressional offices. And in doing so, we began to educate and have conversations. And that led to, relationships with some offices that truly showed that they were for American citizens first. Few and far between, we would think that all of those conversations would talk about the importance of putting American children first, American college grads first, American parents first. But sadly, I would have to say it was less than 25% of the offices we spoke to that were really pro-American. But there were enough, that really gave us inspiration and felt that if we could just break through and keep going, we could make a difference. And so every time we had a positive call, we would celebrate that. We would extend those conversations. I went to Washington, D.C. Barbara Birch went to Washington, D.C. We created fact sheets. And so that was the way that we went about talking to the folks in Washington and still do today.
It's fantastic, and it is it is really, rather than Mr. Smith goes to Washington, it's Mrs. Smiths go to Washington. It's pounding the pavement and knocking on doors and getting FaceTime, the way that a constitutional republic used to work. Marie, who would you and your group consider among the leading lights and heroes in this Congress when it comes to truly supporting and embracing the America First agenda, and in particular, carrying the ball for American workers? Hillary mentioned the alphabet soup of the visa programs that you all focus on. And I know that a lot of our audience is familiar, obviously, with H-1B and EB-5, but if you can also sort of give thumbnails of those lesser known programs that are every bit as harmful, that would be great too.
Sure. I would have to first give a shout out to Congressman Gosar of Arizona. He has been a stellar leader responding to our call in pioneering and sponsoring the HR 3564 legislation, the High Skilled Americans Jobs Act, and he's been wonderful. Okay, so OPT is optional practical training. That is something that F1 foreign visa workers get, F1 foreign students, in fact, and they are allowed to remain in the country even after they've graduated, and it's a petition that they are, students at that point in time. They're taking American jobs. There are close to 250,000 just last year that got OPT, and that's taking American jobs. Now, it's not authorized by Congress. It's not merit-based. There's no oversight or, rules really. And it's tax-free employment. So they're getting a 16.8% tax break between them and their employer. So that creates a huge incentive for the companies to hire them. But the bigger problem in my mind is that, those people then are getting the training to take the jobs of the future. Okay, so think about it. If you were to hear about China or India, allowing Americans into their country, giving them tax-free jobs to take the jobs of the future, that would be unheard of course. So that's a huge problem. That's, stealing the future of American grads. And I'd be happy to tell you a little bit about H4 or, any of the other programs.
I have an article right here from an Indian media outlet called News India Times. This is just from a couple of days ago, and it says that Trump administration argues in favor of EAD for H4 visa holders. So if you believe the spin from the open borders left and the big business right, the Trump administration is cracking down, closing the borders, throwing out all of these foreign workers, and yet when it comes to this program, which of course, just like so many of the others, was created by administrative fiat, there was no input from the people of this country on this, you wouldn't have any idea that in fact the Trump administration is advocating the America Last position instead of America First. So tell us what EAD means and what this program does.
Sure. EAD is Employment Authorization Document. So an H-1B visa holder who has a spouse in the country, and the H-1B has applied for a green card. Under the Obama administration, he thought that it was all well and good to give the H-4 spouses these work authorizations. So once again, it's an end run around congressional authority. There's no LCA, no test of the labor market required. There's no limit. So currently we have, I think, close to 150,000 H-4s taking jobs in this country. And, Hilarie, can tell you a lot more about the impact of that. But it's a huge problem. And that was just a, 2-for-1 jobs giveaway by the Obama administration.
Yeah, Hilarie, tell us more. And just as a side note, the co-author of Sold Out, John Miano, who's an American lawyer who was a former software programmer, along with his colleagues at the Immigration Reform Law Institute, challenged this program in court. And just like with everything else that they've done to try and advocate for American workers, they've been stymied. It's so difficult to get standing in American court when you're an American worker, right, Hilarie?
Yeah, isn't that just so sad and pathetic?
Yeah.
The reality is that the H4 EAD program, just like OPT, was an Obama giveaway, right? There was H1B workers, primarily males, from the country of India, or also from China, and they came to the U.S. and their wives or spouses are educated. They're college educated, sometimes with masters and PhDs. And those women did not want to be sitting home taking care of their children when their parents, grandparents were visiting from their home country. They wanted to be at work. So the single biggest reason that American women have been pushed out of STEM jobs, both in technology and in research and in science, is because of the H4EAD. Because why would any American company have to hire an American or pay an American woman who's a mom who has to leave early or needs flexible hours or really only work 40 hours a week, when in fact you can hire somebody who is not a U.S. citizen, who work for less pay, who work longer hours. And so the H4EAD has done the most harm of any other program against American women, specifically in technology and STEM, in science and research. It
Yeah.
really has hurt American women.
I think it's a really good point that you stress that. And I have highlighted in a documentary that I have available on my YouTube channel at Michelle Malkin, the plight of female workers at UCSF. Now, it's still overall, it's a small portion of the American workforce. Overall, it is mostly men, it's mostly older men now, too, who are being older white men who are being discriminated against. But the fact is that it touches so many people who are native born Americans who are already here. And then compounding that, of course, are all of the other ancillary pipelines that, if they continue to sort of grow unabated, they will, I think, subsume the impact that H-1B has. And we warned about it in Sold Out, and it doesn't get as much attention because people are still trying to get their heads around the harm that H-1B does. So, Marie, can you talk a little bit about this? And, we talked about it in Sold Out, the L1 program, the B1 program. And then also, I want to make sure that you mention J1 as well, because we've got a lot of these Open Borders Inc. forces now pushing on continuing to bring in and allow to stay in so many foreign workers who are coming in on J1 at a time when 1.4 million Americans who work in the healthcare industry were laid off last month.
Right. I mean, that's huge too. I mean, in 2012, we outsourced a lot of nursing and healthcare jobs. And, now we have people saying that we need to bring more in. Well, no, we have healthcare workers, and this goes to the J1 visa, I'm sorry, because a lot of the docs come in on J1.
Yep.
And, they get the waiver where they don't have to return to their country, which is what they're supposed to do. If they just go into a rural setting and work there for a few years. So, we have to remember that these are not purely altruistic motives. They're doing what they have to do in order to remain in the country. We're laying off lots of healthcare workers, including docs, and they're taking reductions in pay. Well, that's not what's supposed to happen when you're in need and when you have a tight labor market. Okay, so this is all part of the song and dance, and we don't buy it. It's also problematic that a lot of the H-1Bs that have been laid off are attempting to jump to other visas. For example, OPT, which is a non-immigrant visa, B1, which is a visitor visa. And it is my contention that if they're jumping to these non-immigrant visas, they should be stopped, which is to be prevented from jumping back to the H-1B, which is a dual intent visa. So in other words, you can't just, hop the lily pad of your choice. You take your choice. If you want to be an immigrant, you stay within those rules and you roll with the punches.
Yes, exactly. And eliminating dual intent, stopping it before they even start doing all of the hopping,
Yes.
would definitely solve that. And of course, more fundamentally, as we all agree, even before the pandemic, but of course the pandemic has exacerbated it. There should have been a freeze on so many of these programs, given the fraud, given the impact on workers, given the fact that the vast majority of American STEM graduates are not getting jobs in the fields that they studied for, on and on and on and on. And of course, for us, the vocabulary, the facts, the data, busting these myths, we are so steeped in it, and we repeat so many of these things so often, you kind of like want to bang your head against the wall because people still don't get it. And I think that's what I find most alarming. As much progress as we've made, and yes, we've got these handful of Republican heroes, and I agree. Paul Gosar is definitely one of them. Many of the co-signers now of the two public letters to President Trump. What's sort of unsatisfying to me is that we don't get a daily drumbeat of this on a lot of the media outlets that are purportedly for America First and purportedly for the Trump White House. And so, let's see. I want to go to Hilarie on this because, of course, you wrote the book, and and yet, so many of these forces. Here's a piece to just sort of play off of. This is Stuart Anderson, notorious open borders libertarian, one man so called think tank funded by corporate interests. He worked for Cato, he worked for the former Michigan Senator Spencer Abraham, one of the worst on embracing mass migration. And of course, Stuart Anderson, when he worked for Spencer Abram, wrote the H-1B section of the 1990 Immigration So-Called Reform Act, and now makes a living crusading for it. And he's got a piece in Forbes that ran over the weekend warning, right? Setting up the red flags. Immigration review could lead to new H-1B visa restrictions. Hilarie, what do you think are, some of the top myths and big lies about H-1B that continue to go, unanswered and undebunked by most of the mainstream media?
Well, I think that first, remember that we're talking today because we want to energize any American who's listening and cares about the future of our country. Now is the time for them to stand with us and hope and pray and do everything they can in their power to push the current administration to expand the ban. And the reason that we're asking for that, and the reason we're talking today, and the reason we're so grateful to you and all your unbelievable work and your passion, is because for so long, the media has been beholden to corporate interests that continue to tell lies and never represent the truth or the fact. The reality is that we have less than 50% of our STEM graduates able to land jobs in STEM careers. The facts are women in the United States are not even wanting to go into STEM careers in science and research and technology because workers' rights have been diminished to the point that they're harassed, they're put down, they're excluded from meetings, they're not being given opportunities to move up the corporate ladder. There's simply not women in the tech field. Even 10 years ago, you had women luminaries in Silicon Valley. Today, you don't see very many women running any of these tech companies. Minorities have been pushed out by H-1Bs. What which Ron Hira explained when we spoke in Washington, D.C., was that minorities and women are the low-hanging fruit. So they're the most dispensable. And what ends up happening is H-1Bs or OPTs or H-4EDs, people coming in on these immigrant visas, they knock out all of the women and the minorities because they're able to be employed and they become the bucket that HR can point to for being a diversified workforce. So when we look at Silicon Valley and we look at the figures from 1990, more than 30% of the programmers in Silicon Valley and Santa Clarita were women in 1990. Today, less than 5% are American women. Now, why do we have Washington politicians continuing to pass legislation to pay for programs to upskill Americans? We don't need to upskill Americans. We have millions and millions of Americans who lost their jobs, who are completely qualified, who speak the language, who understand the processes. And the biggest myth and the biggest problem I have with the lies that are told about H-1B have to do with the accelerator effect. Everyone loves to talk about how we need these immigrants on H-1Bs and OPTs and H-4EDs to push our economy forward, to create catalysts that will make us a wealthier, better nation. The reality is H-1Bs serve as a multiplier for job loss in the United States. Typically, an H-1B or an OPT or an L-1 visa holder is only an on-site manager. And they are managing, if not tens, 20, hundreds of workers off-site. And so forget about the United States just losing the millions of jobs we've lost here because of these visa workers. We've lost over 10 million jobs to India because of outsourcing, and another 10 million to China and Asia Pacific and Europe. So we've lost over 20 million jobs because our data and the jobs that go with them have been outsourced. So just like with manufacturing, the myth here is that immigrants are bringing money and ingenuity and innovation to the US. The reality is when manufacturing goes out of the US, we lose innovation and ingenuity. And when our data leaves the US, we lose innovation and ingenuity and all the jobs that go along with that data. And so H-1Bs are a job loss multiplier. They don't help make jobs in the US, they cause millions of jobs to be lost to the US. And I think that's the biggest myth.
Yeah, that's so important. And all of these things were apparent before this lockdown, before this latest pandemic, and it's only become more obvious, I think, to people. The national security implications, the economic security implications, which you and your group hammer on every single day, and obviously the public health consequences as well. And I'm sure you ladies saw this. I'm sure you tweeted about it as I did. I think about more than a month ago, but for some reason the story popped up again because people had missed it, I guess. But there was an H-1B doctor at the Mayo Clinic who had abused the program and come in here, not to make things better, not to create jobs, not to contribute to the well-being of our country, but to use his position in Rochester, Minnesota, to plot jihad against the Americans who welcomed him with open arms. And that's just one who got caught.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we see this clock ticking down on the opportunity to put pressure on President Trump to do the right thing and expand the ban. It looks like we'll get something, and I'm interested, Marie, in what you all are hearing from your sources in Washington, and also from workers about what their hopes are on what we're gonna get.
Well, I guess Washington's being pretty closed-doored right now because it's hard to get much info. Workers, of course, are looking for OPT to end. There's absolutely, that is such an egregious program, there's no reason for it at all. But the same could really be said of all these programs. I mean, we don't need any new foreign workers coming in the country, but we already have an excess. Our labor pool is already diluted. So, numbers recently show that upwards of 25% of workers in the U.S. are unemployed now. As you said, this was problematic before the pandemic occurred. So, we were looking for these changes before because we're at such a critical time. I mean, who would agree that American citizens being told they had to create knowledge transfer documents to hand over America's intellectual property to foreign nationals? Who would have thought that was a good idea? So have we learned anything from this pandemic experience where we are beholden to and reliant upon other countries to do things for us, notably the top two, major abusers of these programs? Is Congress really okay with this? Is it really okay to give away, our intellectual property? Do you think our sovereignty may be at risk because of this? So I really hope that these are the types of questions that all of your listeners will agree need to be asked of our Congress. It is their fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of American citizens. And to do that, to take a short-term view for corporations to make a quick buck is absolutely the wrong thing to do. And that's why we're working hard. We're making a big push to get our America First candidates in office. Jeff Sessions, Lauren Whitkey, Jerome Bell, Trish Flanagan, and Hilarie, help me with the last gentleman's name.
Barrymore from Alabama.
Yes. So these are all candidates who have vowed that they would get in there and actually work for American workers. They would fight for American citizens. So, it's a start. We want to show that we can do this and that we will vote people out. Remember last year when Kevin Yoder was voted out?
Oh, yes. Yes,
So,
it is possible. You don't
is.
need billions of dollars to do it. You need motivated people, and that's what you're doing, is motivating them, training, and educating them.
That's what we're trying to do. So we really appreciate your voice, Michelle. You've helped immensely, and all the folks that are signing up to help, we appreciate them so much. It's Congress's fiduciary duty, it's the president's fiduciary duty to represent our interests, but it's our duty to get them off their duffs.
Absolutely, and amen for that. I've put your URL at the bottom of the screen here, and I urge people to visit www.amworkco, stands for American Workers Coalition.com for more information. You can find out ways to volunteer to help elect true, bona fide, red, white, and blue America First candidates who are going to do what they say that they're going to do to get elected, and we need more of them. There's not enough of them, and particularly for young people. And I think that's one of the most important things that you gals have done, is reach out to young people, young nationalists, young America First advocates out there, people who've never been involved in the kind of shoe leather, on the ground, pounding the pavement activism that you're now leading. So that is so important. I want to have you both back, and maybe with some of these young people to talk about the kinds of things that we need to do to keep this going. This movement is much bigger than one president, much bigger than one party, and the coalition that you're building is so important. So everyone, please visit American Workers Coalition. Follow them on Twitter. I will have the standalone video of our talk available on YouTube later this afternoon. I know we're all busy moms, so I appreciate you both taking the time to talk to me and talk to our audience. And I just want to give you one last moment here for both of you. If you could speak directly to President Trump and the people in his inner circle who are fighting for us, what would you say? Let's start with Hilarie and then go to Marie.
I would say that I appreciate them and their constant voice with President Trump and his highest administrators to champion American people. We don't have a lot of access and opportunity to the president, and there's just millions of Americans who are hoping and praying that President Trump will remember his campaign promises of 2016, when he stood with Disney workers who were laid off and replaced by foreigners. And we just hope that he remembers that we're voters, and we may not have a lot of money, we may not be billionaires, we may not be running these huge multinational corporations, but we're voters and we're American citizens, and we believe that he will do the right thing. We believe his administration will do the right thing, and we're hoping for the absolute best. We really are. The country is in tremendous crisis right now, with over 30 million newly unemployed. And we know how challenging it is for President Trump and his administration every day, with all the arrows and shots that are going after him. But we trust and hope for the best for our country and for the best for every American citizen and every American child. So thank you, Michelle, for letting us say that and speak to you today. And we really appreciate everything.
You bet. Marie, last words?
Absolutely. I would ask President Trump to please stand with American workers. He has said countless times that American workers are the greatest. He is correct. We have achieved greatness. But currently, the foreign visa workers, the companies that bring them in, including American big business, are siphoning off our American greatness. They're doing this for short-term gain. We need leaders who will take the long view, who will invest in American workers, who will invest in America. Stop allowing, the heart and soul of America to be forced to hand over our intellectual property. Stop siphoning American greatness.
Sounds great. I hope they're listening. We'll make sure to spread the word about all the work you're doing and hope you'll get a lot of new recruits and volunteers for your movement. Keep it going, ladies. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. We
All right.
appreciate you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.